Are you currently pursuing a corporate career? This could be starting out from the very beginning or re-entering after a brief pause. Are you wondering about how to increase your job security or doing what you can to render yourself fireproof, indispensable, protected from things like layoffs rather than being invisible, overlooked, uncompensated, and unsupported in the different goals and aspirations that you have for your career? In today's episode, we're going to talk about these things through the book review of Corporate Confidential: 50 Secrets Your Company Doesn't Want You to Know and What to Do About Them. Hello, this is Alisia Young, and welcome to Teach Me Freedom. This podcast is about learning how to live a freer life from authors, entrepreneurs, and experts, those who have done it and who teach others how to do it as well, and what it feels like while applying those methods to our lives along the way. Every episode will deliver resources, anecdotes, and/or reviews to support you in living a more freedom-filled life. Let's jump in. Hello, Freedom Finders, and welcome to our second book review on this channel. In this book review, we're going to be discussing the book Corporate Confidential: 50 Secrets Your Company Doesn't Want You to Know and What to Do About Them. And we'll be looking at the background of the book, along with what led to my interest in the book, some key ideas and critiques, along with key takeaways and what comes next in terms of topic ideas based on what was learned from this book. Now, before we actually jump into the episode, I want to apologize to those of you who are regular listeners. I set the expectation of releasing a show every 2 to 3 weeks based on my workload at the time when starting the podcast. And I just went through a very busy period where just things got very busy, a lot of new things happening and just a lot of overlapping things. And I just didn't have the physical time nor the mental energy to work on the episodes, but I have been thinking about you every day and I'm so excited to release this episode. So thank you for tuning in. Now, returning to the book we're going to be discussing, it's written by the author Cynthia Shapiro, and she has a background in working as a human resources executive and vice president. So she has a lot of insight on the HR side of things for the reasons and the things companies do to protect themselves. And now she works as a workplace consultant and employee advisor, and so works to really empower those who are on the other side in the employee roles and may not know what's going on behind the scenes and want to have more insights to be able to take more proactive and more informed and empowered actions. So what led to the interest in this book is the same as a lot of the topics in this season, and it comes from previous experiences, in particular an experience that was so impactful that I still think about it to this day, even though it's been quite some time since it happened. I just think about a specific job where when I look back and think about how things unfolded, I see that there was a lot happening behind the scenes and I could actually sense it. I had this feeling of unrest and I had this feeling of anxiety, and I just felt like certain interactions were not genuine. I only know what I'm told, so that's why I also want to read this book to get more informed, because unfortunately, we cannot always take things at face value. And that's a big reason I wanted to understand this book, read this book, is because I wanted to understand, why is it that, coming from the perspective of an employee, is it that we get told certain things full well knowing that that's not the case? And so this book has shed some light on that. Another hope of reading this book is for those of you who will choose to read it or who have read it, is that if you've experienced job loss or if you have experienced discrimination at work, it can definitely lead to feeling a sense of paranoia and cynicism, especially if you're planning to build your career for a lengthy period of time. I feel that going through certain things can help you to see the world as it truly is, instead of seeing it through these naive glasses. And but really the hope was for this book to balance that perspective, especially because in this season we've been distinguishing between corporate versus entrepreneurial pursuits. But one thing that I have read is that even if you're working for a corporation, you are still an entrepreneur, because you still have to be selling an image, which is one of the key things that are talked about in this book. Now, before we jump into some of the key ideas of this book, I forgot to mention a bit of background of the book, but it's very straightforward, which I appreciated. And some of the objectives Cynthia mentions of her book is to help to better understand the master plan behind the scenes and secret agendas which can be affecting employees, and especially when we don't know why. This helps to understand why certain decisions are being made and to prime us to be aware of them, so we're not walking around with glazed eyes. So the key ideas that stood out to me in this book fell under two major categories. And the first one related to companies' fear of legal exposure. And the other one was that it's all about managing the image that your company has of you. So let's start with what I thought was the scariest one, and that is that employers, companies, a lot of what they do is influenced by their fear of legal exposure. The company's top priority is protecting themselves from being sued, whether that is from an employee who has been let go, fired, released from the company, or maybe they see the employee's behavior and then that is taken to be reflective of the company, and that can lead to legal consequences. So a top priority that affects a lot of things is protecting themselves from being sued. This is why we notice things in organizations such as reorganizations, glass ceilings, managing employees out, such as through layoffs, through enforcing early retirement, and even making an illegal firing appear to be legal. And so that particular point of making an illegal firing appear legal is something that I really would like to look more into at some point in time. And I'm curious about how the laws may be different in different countries. The remaining key ideas are captured in that umbrella key idea of it's all about managing the image that your company has of you. And this is something that we hear in any aspect of business or making money. We have to present an image. We're selling ourselves. We're selling what we're able to do. But there were a few things that stood out. So the first one is to always be looking at things from the lens of your employer. And the example that was mentioned is that of if you experience a major life event. For example, if you are going to be getting married or planning a wedding, if you're going to be experiencing a pregnancy, purchasing a new home, dating. And so there might be some interest from colleagues, from supervisors, managers about how these things are going, and there might be, whether it be genuine or feigned interest. But the key point here is it's all about, even though these can be exciting events, hopefully they're exciting events, when people are asking questions from a managerial perspective, they're really focused on how is it going to impact your work. And so key responses, to sum it up really quickly, like in a quick sentence, hey, things are going well there. I'm focused on what I'm doing here and I have this in check, so that they know, even though I have other stuff going on in my personal life, my focus when I'm at work is work, and those things happening in my personal life are not going to take away my attention and my productivity here. So that may be common sense for some, but it was interesting to me because in some work environments that I've been in, part of what makes the work environment feel human is sharing different events that are going on in our life, especially if people are going through similar life events together. It can be a way to bond. And it's also a way to get to know more about colleagues and connect with them on another level. But something that was emphasized is if you are going through some of these events, then to ensure that you're not taking up too much time in the on the work clock, and to instead set up a separate time when it's not working hours to spend time with people and discuss that kind of stuff. So that was interesting, because I thought that it also depended on the work culture, especially because advice I was given, not from this book, but previously, was whenever you're starting a new job to really scope it out and really pay attention, especially those first few months, and see what the culture is like and try to immerse yourself into it, because if you're acting too differently, then you're likely to not be trusted. So it's about monitoring the situation, but also developing that judgment to be able to realize that even though things are not verbally being said, these things are being watched. Another idea from this point of it's all about managing the image the company has of you is a big one of, are you a threat or are you indispensable? And it was really about demonstrating your talent without stepping on toes. And this is one that really resonated with me, because I know, and I would be so curious to hear from you about what your personality type is, your working type. But for me, I just want it to be known that, hey, I'm working hard. Hey, I'm able to do this. Hey, look, I have ideas. I want to contribute, and I want you to see me as valuable to your team. But it's all about the approach. And this is something that I know that I need to work on, is my approach, so that I am seen as very valuable, but not seen as threatening. And something comes to mind, like I had this experience where I remember I had given some ideas because I could see from what I was doing that there were some inefficiencies, and I could see it because of other experiences that I had been fortunate to have, and had more autonomy in those roles to be able to make certain calls. And so it was something that I thought would be appreciated in this new environment, but I realized that it did not go over well with my higher up. They did not take it the way that I was intending for them to take it, and it looked, when I was trying to make suggestions to help things to be more efficient, especially to help me be more productive in my role, and to hopefully help everybody to work more cohesively, with that understanding that in order for us to be very productive, we need to be on the same page and understanding what each other do. They took it the wrong way, and it came off as me stepping on their toes. And so a big thing that is emphasized in the book is that it's important to recognize and honor that even though you may have fantastic ideas, that what is in place at this point in time came to be because of the hard work and efforts of people before you even got to the position that you're in. And it's also important to look at how you're framing what you're saying to higher ups, because they are humans too. And the perception I had of higher ups are that I never ever thought that somebody higher up could be threatened by me. I just wrongfully assumed that if somebody is higher up than me, then they would have this huge amount of security in themselves. But we are humans, and so it is possible to feel threatened by somebody if they have good ideas and they're presenting it very confidently, or maybe presenting it in a way that is not showing appreciation for the way things have been done up to a certain point, or coming in as though it's time to change and do a haul on everything that's currently come to be. And so that was a major learning lesson, because I know from that experience that comes to mind, I shifted into the complete opposite direction, and instead of offering ideas, I just kept them all to myself. And it was like, my ideas are not going to be appreciated, so let me just keep them to myself. And then as a result, I would not be seen because I'd be so quiet, because I'm scared to be seen. And scared to contribute the great ideas I know I have, and be fearful of shining brightly. So that was a major key idea. The last point in terms of key ideas, which falls under the umbrella of it's all about managing the image your company has of you, is connected to demonstrating your ability to grow beyond your current position and show that you're ready to be promoted. And the way to go about this that's mentioned is to volunteer to do work on top of one's current responsibilities. So this may sound similar to a conversation that we had with Dr. Dawn. I'll post the link to that episode previous to this one, where he talked about stretch assignments. And so it's a similar concept of taking on different roles and responsibilities. In this book, Cynthia refers to it as the hot potato. So these are tasks and projects that no one wants to do, but they're necessary. So this came up as a key idea because it's something that I remember us discussing with Dr. Dawn, and it does make sense that you want to be able to demonstrate that, hey, I can handle what I have on my plate, but I desire to take on more, and I want to show you what I can do and how I can contribute to your company by actually showing you what I'm able to do. But an area here, which it was a little bit confusing for me to understand how to navigate it, is what if you are at max capacity and it's just your workload is high, maybe because you're short-staffed or because the nature of the job, it's very voluminous. How do you get the opportunity to demonstrate that you can do more? And you want to take on more leadership, you want to be able to grow. So that was a question that came up based on that. And I know it's very situational based on the role and based on the company, but that was something that came to mind. Now let's discuss critiques. And to be honest with you, right now, I do not have any critiques because I believe that the book offered what it said it would. So Corporate Confidential, get an understanding of what happens in corporations, why they make certain decisions, why that leads to certain people getting laid off or managed out. It gave it an understanding to why corporations make decisions, but at the other end, people are blindsided. And it's because most of these things aren't out in the open, which is why this book was written. I feel that that objective was met. Another reason I don't have any specific critiques is because reading certain parts of this book led me to question, when certain scenarios come up, what are the specific ways to navigate them? And so this book has been helpful because it shed light on these potential situations, but I don't think the purpose of this book was to go into the nitty-gritty of handling these specific situations. And I think that the author presents many resources that we can go into to read more on these different topics, and some of them we're going to be talking about more. So you'll hear about that in the What's Next section. Another reason that currently there aren't any criticisms is because the author has written multiple books on this topic about secrecy in corporate and how to understand that secrecy and what to do now that you know about it. And so it's my intention to read those other books to be able to better understand this topic as a whole and see if any criticisms come up from reading all the books collectively. All right, now let's get into the key takeaways. The first key takeaway is to not be gone too long. And this also relates to what we talked about with Dr. Dawn, and when he shared about one of his clients who, when she was on mat leave, she made sure that she still stayed connected with the company by taking on multiple projects during her maternity leave so that the company would not forget about her, but also so that she could still make sure she's working on her skills even though she wasn't completely in the office. I'll share a quote from the book with you related to not being gone too long. Starting on page 93, Cynthia writes, "Companies may not be able to remove you while on leave, but they can include you in a layoff, downsizing, or reorganization while you're away. They're also only legally required to return you to your, quote, same or similar position, unquote. The, quote, or similar, unquote, wording allows them to manage you out by reinstating you in an undesirable area of the company or position when you return. That was quite unsettling. I don't know how that plays out or how that's able to play out in different countries, but it's very unsettling because my understanding back when I was learning about things like maternity leave is that when you're away, you don't even have to worry about your role, that you're going to come back and it's fine. I didn't know that they could reorganize or shift things, and a tactic that she shares as well in the book to ensure that you're not burning out, but also that you're also giving the company time to see how important you are to the company, but also not be gone too long that they start to restructure in your absence, is to take 1 week off every 6 months, and to take a maximum of 2 weeks if that 1 week is too short, because after those 2 weeks, because companies move so fast, they will start to see a way to work without you, and then that can start to shift things, get things moving. It's like planting seeds. So that was unsettling for many reasons, because thinking about, well, if I'm of childbearing years, I'm still undecided about this decision and if the opportunity will present itself, but we'll talk about that more in a future season focused on like pregnancy and parenthood. But it's unsettling because if I were to take some time away, I would like to focus on the reason I'm leaving, like the child, and I don't want to be stressing that I'm every day that I'm gone, they're going to find somebody to take over for me, and that once I come back, that I'm not going to be safe, and that they could just find a way to get rid of me. But then again, that goes to show a negative attitude on my end of this fear of not being able to find other opportunities if one should end. So that's, I guess, an attitudinal thing to be discussed later, or to keep in mind, is to, not giving away too much power to organizations, but also realizing that when we're building our career, but our reputation is partially attributed to who we've worked for and what references or relationships we've built during our times there. Another key takeaway is that of discrimination, and in particular ageism and parenthood. And so in the book, Cynthia mentions that even though it's not something that people speak out in the open, because any type of discrimination isn't discussed in the open, the goal is for it to be covert and hidden and covered up so that people think it's something else other than what it is. When it comes to ageism, it's concerning because as we grow, we develop our skills, we develop our experience, but it seems that there is more of a focus on wanting to bring in youth and fresh blood into organizations and trying to manage other people out, such as by early retirement, or trying to change things so quickly that it's hard for people to keep up. And then it can be discouraging that some people might think, maybe I'm too old for this. And then with discrimination of when it comes to parents, even though career and their role can be very important to them, there seems to be more of a focus on hiring people who are single and give the impression that they value their career above everything and may not even want to have a family. And then people who are maybe outside of the bounds of childbearing years, because I have heard a concern of companies hiring people of childbearing years, especially if they know that they're married, and wondering, are they planning to just get pregnant and then go on leave? As I reflect back, I had an experience of being asked inappropriate questions about, oh yeah, are you dating? Are you single? Are you married? Do you have any children? And it was coming off with a really friendly tone, but I'm like, okay, I see what's happening here, because you're taking notes and this can and will be held against me. So it's quite unsettling. But yeah, even though being a parent is can be so important to certain people, companies have the perspective that those who aren't parents are more likely to be able to stay late and are able to just drop whatever it was they were going to do, like their plans, and cater to the company's needs. Of course, not every company is like this. I think this book was meant to focus on the worst things, to prepare for the worst. But it was just very unsettling to read about, especially being at a stage of life where I noticed that the time that I graduated gets further and further behind me from when I did my university degree. And as parenthood becomes this decision that I'm thinking about more and more and more, and really trying to build my career and financial well-being, it's unsettling to hear about these things. But that's why we read these things, so we can be aware and informed. The next key takeaway is that of swallowing pride. And I did share with you that experience where I was all too happy to share some of what I thought was knowledge and what I thought were great ideas, but it wasn't perceived in that manner. Reason swallowing pride is a key takeaway is, and I feel like some of you might relate to this, is that of career. And the value it holds in our lives, provides for us financially. For some of us who see our career as an ability to fine-tune skills and continue to grow professionally, it's valuable to us in that way. I know some people who see jobs as money coming in, but then they have a very full life outside of work, that their work, it's not the highlight and the center of their life. Swallowing pride is also came up as a key takeaway because I learned when reading some books in terms of deciding whether or not to change careers, a key thing in most of those books was to identify what your values are. And I realized that, to me, being praised is important, being validated is important, and being acknowledged and seen for the efforts that I'm putting out there are important. And something I've realized and have been told by people who I look up to and have shared advice with me as I'm trying to get my career on track, it's been that you cannot rely so hard on getting praise and validation. You cannot use that to fulfill you. Why is it so important to you? But part of it is because that's how I know how I'm doing. Because when it comes to working in an organization and I'm being evaluated by one key person, if I don't know what they're thinking and what their impression is, it's hard for me to know how I'm doing, especially if I think I'm doing a good job, but they have a different idea. So it's not just about the praise, like all that is important, but it's also important because there's not always communication. Sometimes I've witnessed favoritism, and it can be discouraging when you're working so hard and you feel like it's not being noticed and that it's not being acknowledged from a value standpoint, but also from a, hey, like this is my career and you're an important factor of that. So I really need to know that you see what I'm doing. You know, sometimes there are requests to do things certain ways, and you might feel like I did that, hey, but I have a way that I might be able to do things a little bit more, what we consider to be more efficient. But it's not necessarily our battle to fight. Our role is to be one of support and show we can follow directions very well and produce results until we have gathered trust to be invited to provide input. And at that point, got to be very, very, very cautious about how that input or ideas are being prevented so as not to what may be considered threatening behavior, even though that really depends on each individual and how secure they are in themselves, in their role. Some other advice that was given is to work around bosses' idiosyncrasy. We are humans, except the few of us who happen to be robots, and you might know some robots who are more robot than human, but for the most part we are humans, and so can be unique features about the ways that we interact, the things that make us tick. And so I think that part of being an employee is be able to read your leadership well, your managers well, based on what they'll show you. There can be behavior that is very questionable, but then there's also sometimes where you may see patterns. Another key takeaway that came out of this topic is the question of what is power? Bosses have a lot of power, and the fact that these were secrets and employees were not being told this stuff shows that it was being protected. And understanding that everybody is human, but also understanding that when people hold power, that causes a shift in the way you may relate to them. At least it does for me, because if somebody has power and they have some type of influence on my future direction, I'm going to consider that in my interactions. So I'd like to share a quote with you related to this. This quote starts on page 47, and I'm going to change the he's to they's to allow for gender neutrality. It is your choice to allow your gatekeeper to either feel threatened or feel secure, to inspire them to open the pearly gates for you, supporting you and your efforts, or scare them into slamming shut any opportunities in your path. The all-powerful position. There are certain chosen few in life that simply have too much power over vital aspects of your happiness. They are the ones who get to pass judgment and make your efforts worthwhile or worthless. The way companies are set up, that person is always your boss. They're the one in charge of handing out money, determining who gets a raise and who doesn't. They're the one who determines whether your efforts have value or if you're just someone to ignore. They're the one who gives out the assignments, picking who gets the best ones. They're the one who selects the review score you will get for the year based on how they personally view your efforts and value to the team. And they are the one who recommends advancement or keeps you from being considered. A boss can change the opinion your company has of you with just one word. It doesn't matter if you like them or not. You have to respect them, if for no other reason than for their ability to propel or destroy your career. No one has as much soul power to do so. Aren't there others in the organization watching so that there's more than just the opinion of one person at work here holding the keys to your future? No. Other members of the organization are too busy to know what you're really doing or to see your value. They will largely leave that determination to your boss. In the eyes of the company, you are your boss's opinion of you. You'd better actively manage your gatekeeper's opinion of you if you'd like to gain access to whatever's on the other side of that gate. Your job security lies solely in your boss's hands. It doesn't matter what a boss tells you to smooth things over. They're always the one who decides who goes and who stays on their team. It is almost never out of their hands. When layoffs, RIFs, or reorgs come calling, you'd like to think their decisions would be based on fairness and objectivity, but the truth is, the boss is the one who has to deal with the employees every day. It's just too tempting to remove any employees who have become a thorn in their side, those who are unsupportive or just generally unfriendly. Just too tempting. So rather than skills, ability, or fairness, the decision can sometimes be based on whether or not the boss personally likes you. I'll leave you with that quote, but it really connected to that importance of swallowing pride and the power dynamic and how it fits into corporations. We'll probably discuss this more because I'm still simmering on this right now as we speak. And then the last key takeaway is to be critical when applying for new positions. So this is something that I contrast with the discussion that we had with Dr. Don, and when he was suggesting that when opportunities come up, go for it. You may not know everything about it and you make your best decision with what you know, but go for it because it can be amazing.
The takeaway here is to exercise caution when considering new positions, especially when it comes to internal positions. There can be this excitement of a new role, new opportunity, maybe increased salary, more responsibilities, and what's considered to be a more important title. And that excitement can prevent somebody from thinking very clearly, but it's important to exercise caution because some positions that are new are intrinsically set up to fail. And that could be because of the way that they're set up. They don't have a strong foundation. Maybe there are some stakeholders or executive members who are against it. And so because there's not they don't have that buy-in, they're not supportive and don't want the new position to be successful. And maybe there's not enough resources available to make that position successful. So there are also positions that we are cautioned to be wary about, and these are called burnout positions. So some of these may be positions that have a high turnover of people going through the role, and these can often be considered scapegoat positions. So what often happens, according to Cynthia, is that there can be dysfunction coming from higher levels, and because the higher ups are not organized or there's toxicity, it funnels downward and leads to lack of success or too high of a workload or some level of impossibility for that position, that role to be successful. And so you'll see a lot of people coming into position and leaving just as quickly. And the thing about burnout positions and these other positions that from the get-go are unlikely to be successful because there's not a lot of support that's needed to have a strong foundation is that external candidates are more likely to sense that there's dysfunction in this role and will be more likely to steer clear than somebody who is coming from internally in the company. And actually, upon saying that, that is one critique that I would have, is it would be really nice to have had some examples of what do dysfunctional roles look like. How can we recognize that? Like maybe there are some job postings that we can see, because if external candidates are able to recognize this and stay far away, what is it that internal employees can be mindful to look out for so they also know, this is not the one to go for. Just hold where you are or look somewhere else.
Now for what's next for the podcast. What topics will we be exploring? Some of these are directly suggested in Cynthia's book of these are skills that you need to work on developing. And then some of these are ideas that came up based on reading and on this season. These include effective communication, how to negotiate and, speak up for ourselves, how to effectively network, how to present ideas in an articulate way, how to be able to make genuine connections with people, how to better position and frame when we're talking, when we're expressing our ideas, how to increase our abilities to be influential, and learning more about power and increasing it for ourselves in a positive way. Power for good, not for bad, power for good. And in particular, I will share that one of the biggest things that came up for me, I forgot to share this in the takeaways, but the thing I'll wrap up with here is the biggest takeaway that came up when reading this is a topic that we're going to be talking about in future is the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And it's not a common lifestyle and there's different levels. But as I read this, I was like, this is something that we need to look into some more, because if I am going to be living my life so focused on making money, it's like, it just doesn't feel like a fulfilling life. This book has been very informative, and the topics that we'll go into will also help us to feel more empowered as well, in addition to the empowerment gained from this book. It just had me feeling like I do not want to be putting so much energy in this aspect of life. I don't want to feel like I'm part of a rat race. That's why another topic will be about living a fulfilling life and spirituality, God, and what is a purpose-based life, what's important in life. So we'll look at philosophy, we'll look at spirituality, we'll look at religion, explore these topics. So thank you again for tuning in to today's episode. We have several interviews with authors coming up for our next several episodes, and some updates for what to expect in the new year of 2022. So, as always, Freedom Finders, honor your time, honor your energy. You know how to reach me if you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for the show. Thanks again for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Teach Me Freedom podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found it beneficial. Feel free to reach out to us at teachmefreedom2020@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the show on your favorite platform for streaming content. Feel free to comment and leave a 4 or 5 star review if you feel so inclined. connect with you next time.